Josh. Welcome to the Deep Life.
It's good to be here, guys. Thank you.
We're excited to have you. I'm excited to kind of pick your brain. These are the types of conversations that we get really excited about. So we can go deep. But first, if you could just maybe share a little bit of an introduction and give the people listening a little bit of background into who you are and maybe a little bit into your coaching.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. I think before I start with that, I want to invite all the listeners to maybe jump into this experience with the eyes, the ears, and the mind of an innocent child. What do I mean by that? Curiosity and wonderment, childlike. I'd say on the other side of that coin for me is childish. So shaming, blaming, criticizing. And if you'd be willing to notice parts of yourself in me as I give my story, opinions, and experiences, I'd probably offer that that's probably all anyone could do is give you their opinion and or experience. So cool.
Yeah. I love that. I love how he started that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, totally. Invitational.
Yeah.
Do what you choose, but invitational. I'm going to start in maybe a funny place. I'm going to give voice to a couple things from my youth that once caused me a great deal of pain, is really my gifts that I include as a coach to this day. So it's almost like the cosmic giggle, if you will, or very paradoxical. So I'm going to give voice to a couple things there before any like formal education. And even with that being said, as a coach, I would offer, I really wonder what's more valuable, formal education or your life experiences. So yeah, that's my offering there. Yeah, I'm going to start at the tender age of like, I believe my recollection is about 4 or 5. I was put in front of a psychologist at that young age, 4 or 5, to determine who do I want to spend the rest of my life with in terms of a parent. So needless to say, scary, uncomfortable, unpredictable. Make my decision. Next thing I know, I'm living with pops, new town, in an apartment without mom, like super scared. Shortly after that, eczema kind of comes on board, obesity comes on board. So there's that going on. Mom's still around, and so I'm able to see mom on the weekends. And with mom, I think what's cool to mention here is she's heavily involved in and is involved in like the charismatic evangelical sect of Christianity, more specifically Foursquare. If you know anything about Foursquare, there's no shortness of weirdness there. The founder, Amy McPherson, is supposedly the reincarnation of the Virgin Mary. So there's that piece. Things you might see in those churches are people speaking in tongues. It's maybe like alien dialect or gibberish. I don't know. It's open for debate. People kind of convulsing, shaking out, like real, like a full somatic experience and like on the floor. So maybe needless to say, as a youngster, that was a normal Sunday, but yet scary. And because that was the norm for mom, there wasn't a ton of clarity there. So that's what my youth looked like, that in terms of like religion. In hindsight, it's kind of funny. It looks a lot like bioenergetics or active meditation, what the cool kids do now. So yeah, there's that piece. Outside of that, this is all still kind of grade school-ish. I'm having like hallucinations. I'm like seeing ghosts and entities, and I'm like, man, again, not a ton of guidance there. What is that? What's going on? And I eventually shut it down, or at least try to shut it down. And what's curious now having my own daughters is I think it's if the parents aren't groomed or have an understanding there, I think they shut that down immediately. What I mean by that is like intuition.
Hmm.
Um, I believe we're all of us have these intuitive faculties, whether that is clear seeing, clear hearing, clear feeling, what have you. So why the heck do I mention this? Intuition is a tool that I like to incorporate today as a coach. I'm getting more comfortable with including that and trusting that. Um, because I shut that down, by no means do I think I'm clairvoyant. I will say I'm very comfortable and in touch with like my feelings, my sensations, and even hearing. Like for me, those are more comfortable places to be. So historically, like I'm very discerning of like the internal voices inside, and then even on the outside, like just picking up things that maybe the next person wouldn't pick up. I'll use this if appropriate and with clients' permission. Let's say they're having a lot of trouble in like the literal realm of their story, and maybe we'll touch on this later, but um, whatever that story is, my goal as a coach, or at least some direction, is can we get kind of to the roots of things? And I think the ego does a tremendous job of keeping us safe. So I would offer getting to the root of things can be very scary. And so depending on the client, if appropriate, I will ask if I can use my intuition, or maybe what the client's not saying, but I'm hearing. Um, so yeah, that's why I wanted to mention that piece there. Um, Also, yeah, at the same time here as a youngster, I'm also experiencing sleep paralysis. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. I grew up
I
with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
please.
I haven't talked about it or brought it up in years. That's actually really interesting. I didn't think we were going to go there on the podcast, but I can't wait to hear your experience with it, because Dan's never
Yeah.
experienced it, and I have many times when I was younger, and then more recently, about 5 or 6 years ago. I haven't had one in about 5 or 6 years, but a few times then. So please dive into that
Yeah, I
quickly.
mean, I'll briefly mention it. The reason I mention it is it's weird. I don't know what that is. I would say being really young, again, with not maybe even having the courage to share this with mom or dad or stepmom. It's like, what do you do with that? Um, yeah, extremely scary. It happened quite a few times when I was younger, and then even into like teenage. The last time I had sleep paralysis, I would say was, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago.
Mm.
I don't experience it anymore, which I'm cool. I'm cool with.
Yeah, same.
um, so with that being said, Paul Chek personally told me just a couple of years ago that that's ego death.
Hmm.
Okay, okay, cool. Well, then my ego died. I don't know how many times
Yeah.
growing up. Yeah, so yeah, that's happening. Whether it's a trauma response or not, I'll never know. But there's that. Um, I think I want to kind of speed up a bit into about 2015, early mid 20s. I'm probably the heaviest I've ever been, like tipping the scales. I'm not the tallest guy, so it's obvious. I'm uncomfortable. I'm scared, pretty miserable. Around this time, I think is when like paleo got maybe some buzz ish, 13, 14, 15. Anyhow, I overhear it. I look it up. I see, okay, cool, eggs, bacon, spinach. That's easy enough. As a general theme, I'm a self-starter, so excuse me. Uh, Throw that together in the skillet, and I want to say I never look back, but I jump into that world, if you will, right? Like the paleo world, from what I was coming from, was like processed foods, instant foods, like health by any means wasn't necessarily a thing growing up for me, at least healthy food. Maybe on the weekends, like I would get a home cooked meal, but for the most part, I grew up on like convenience foods. Um, so it's going great, and I go full bore. It goes from paleo to the 5 finger shoes to the intermittent fasting to the butter in the coffee to changing out my lights to red lights only in the house and going to bed when the sun goes down, and exploring the many ways we think our ancestors ate. the, the reason I say it like that is because now in hindsight, what comes up for me is supposedly Nietzsche said like self-improvement is self-masturbation. Like that was me 1,000%. Like doing the thing, but like empty and miserable inside. Like still there was that hole of like missing something. And with that being said, at that same period of time, like 2014, 15, I'm very left brain, analytical, scientific materialism. Like, no, that's it right there. Whatever they got going on, almost like teetering atheist. And yeah, and I mentioned Nietzsche earlier. In hindsight, I think through high school, into college, into my mid-20s was very like, this is all bullshit. Yeah, just to give you a taste of like the pendulum has swung for me quite a bit. So that's this time period. Meanwhile, super interested in health and wellness and how can I optimize? So everything from my fitness to, like I mentioned before, the food and the lifestyle stuff. Fast forward a little bit here to well, before I do that, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I do think it's relevant because I do recognize and include this today with like bringing in the human experience with whoever I'm coaching. From about 2012 to, gosh, maybe a slow death from 2020 till about 2023, I DJ'd professionally, did the nightlife scene. My point is like not a stranger to the past life. Alcohol, women, putting stuff up my nose, like that was my life for a bit. And it almost killed me, wrecked my health. It's one thing to go party, it's one thing to work in it. And like, I want to be healthy, but yet I'm putting stuff up my nose. So it's like this, what are my values? I don't know, I'm split. Like, what do I want? Like, I want this healthy lifestyle, but yet this is how a part of me makes means meet. So yeah, there's that whole thing going on. And whether you're in nightlife or a shift worker, that's the quickest way to wreck your body. I think I'm still nourishing parts of my body and my soul from that experience. So there's that. Shifting into like 2017, I find myself at the Czech Institute in San Diego, just out of pure interest, wanting to learn more about health. So, at that point, I think Paul Chek's like super cool. Can't wait. Like, I hope he's there, type of thing. Right. So I roll up to the Czech Institute. It's not Paul, it's this other dude, Jator. And I'm like, man. And it wasn't long until that, whatever it was, 3-day, 2-day weekend, we're taking in the info. It's a bunch of health nerds, right? We're talking about like going to bed early, drinking water, and eating the appropriate foods for your body. Not the sexiest thing, but I'm into it. Everybody else here is like geeked out, I'm enjoying myself. And it's not long until Jator's like the instructor for the class. And it wasn't long until I'm like, wow, this guy's pretty cool. Like the way he's delivering what I would say is maybe not the most interesting information is like the questions he's posing and his approach and his demeanor and his patience. And I'm like, man, like this guy's got something. He's making this information like maybe more digestible or interesting and expanding my thoughts and mine. So I thought. Needless to say, have a great weekend there. It's awesome. I'm like, this is super cool. Just kind of surface level, stay in contact with Jator like via social. Walk away from that. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna take what I learned and apply it, go on. That's 2017. Gonna fast forward a bit here. I don't think I'm skipping anything. 2020, I'm at a place of, I guess, the whole being let me add this, like being into Czech and like kind of in that time period of like 17 into 2020, there's just small mention. The whole left brain thing's, I'm starting to balance out a little more. I'm starting to come over here to the middle, maybe dance over here to the right. And so just want to mention that. 2020, I'm like, you know what? I got to switch things up for myself. Like I have this deep interest in health and wellness still. I wonder what this would look like. I'm kind of flirting with the idea of being like a functional medicine practitioner. And I'm like, wow, there's a ton of programs, right? There's a lot of programs out there. And I'm checking out Chris Kresser, pretty big name, and I noticed he's like kind of promoting a course for health coaches. Super intensive year-long commitment. There's like functional medicine nutrition training on one part of it, and then like on the other part of it, it's like how to conduct a session as a health coach and like offer information to potential clients and stuff like in that realm. So I dive in. I don't know. That's about as much as I know at that point as I'm going into this program. And yeah, there's you for the coaching part of it. It's an extreme deep dive. Like my mind's blown in the sense of like it's not a consultation. I'm not here to tell you what to do. And so that alone was like, whoa, what? Like, so I'm learning to, okay, it's open questions and it's client centered and it's their philosophy or way that they're grooming everyone to coach is kind of like present time and future focus. So it's very like motivational interviewing style, which it has the time and place, and maybe I'll get to that. Reflective statements, open questions, just learning how to like navigate a conversation. That's their lens, that's their philosophy. So I'm in there, and I think my main takeaways that I want to share here is I'm in a large cohort with students from all over the world. And one of the things I noticed rather quickly was here's all these folks that I would offer, wow, have access and resources to probably some of the best information on the planet in terms of like health, wellness, what's fluff, what's BS, what's really vetted, if you will. And you get the opportunity to coach your peers, like everything you're learning communication wise. And like I said, everyone has a knowledge base and or resources to that. And you get to practice that with your peers. I noticed, and it's not a judgment or criticism, it was merely observational of myself included. Wow, everyone here seems to have like some really deep rooted challenges, whether that's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And it looks like everyone wants to save themselves, but is kind of blind to that and is channeling or projecting that onto their clients. I want to save the world, but yet like I really want to save myself. And so that's just my own personal observation at this point. And then shifting to, I had the opportunity to coach people from around the world from referrals. So I'm seeing everybody from like Australia, Spain, Northern Europe, like really getting a taste of just different cultures. And as a new coach, this was really valuable for me to see, wow, like everyone's pretty much singing the same song. Like I want to walk more. I want to eat better food, or I don't know how to turn off my iPhone at night. Whatever it is, it's like that was just so common, like common ground. Like I want to do better, but I can't seem to do it. Like, all right, that's interesting and cool for me to learn. We're really no different here in the States or whatnot. So noticing in that cohort, I'm new to coaching, and back to this observational piece of like, there's such a struggle with like mental and emotional, but yet we're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, okay, but I'm having challenges as a new coach with my peers and with real clients from all over the world. Of like, there's a block here. Like,
Yeah.
I want to do this, but I'm really shaking my head no. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. It was in hindsight, I wouldn't take it back because it gave me a taste of what that looks like. But meanwhile, I'm like, there's something else here. I know there's something else here. And whether it's like a divine like pull, I'm still like checking out what Tor's doing. I'm like, he's talking a lot about this mental emotional stuff. And it sounds like that's what I'm being drawn to. So in that cohort, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna hire him. I'm gonna hire Jator. I'm gonna get some lessons, or excuse me, some one-on-one coaching as like a personal client, and maybe even like split this up and pick his brain. Like, from what I know, understand he's been doing this for years, and I'm like, okay, I want to understand what I'm getting myself into here. So I split that up. I'll speak to maybe the mentorship part of it, just kind of picking his brain and seeing what he has to say about that whole, motivational interview and like future focus. We don't go in the past. Last time I checked, our egos are very attached to the past, so I'm boggled. so so he's lending me his 2 cents, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, just like anything else, man, there's going to be people over here saying, do this over here, or this is the right cap, and yada, yada, yada. And so I'm like, I'm taking that in. All right, cool. I'm going to finish this program at least. Meanwhile, have some like one-on-one sessions in terms of like inner child work. Like I go head first. Like, what's this shadow stuff about? Sounds cool. Sounds mysterious. So I'm there. Probably says a lot more about me, but I'm into it. My mind's blown. Needless to say, like first couple sessions, I go there. I mean, we go deep. I come out of those sessions, I'm feeling like Neo when he gets unplugged. Like I'm like bedridden. Like, what the hell is this? Mind's blown, and I'm like, okay, I want to do this stuff. Not knocking this over here, but I really want to take a deeper dive into this mental emotional space. So this is all 2020. Moving forward from that point, I think it's about a couple months, and I jump into a whole nother year program with Jator. It's called Elevate. Really similar in terms of lifestyle stuff that I'm pretty well versed in at this point, just coming out of that program with Chris Kresser, have the knowledge and background of Czech. And so, but there's a kind of light dive, easy entry point to like mental emotional stuff. So I do that. We get the opportunity as you're in that program to do a lot of observational hours, if you will, with like your peers within the group. So this is what I'm stoked about. It's a safe place to actually start practicing mental emotional work. So I do that for a year. Transformative, excellent, great, great opportunity, great space to kind of learn and grow with peers and have that space where it's okay to talk about mental emotional things. Fast forward, I don't think I'm missing anything here. This is all this like formal stuff. So after that year program, again, not much of a lapse between now I'm diving into Illuminate, and now I'm not even sure what I'm getting myself into, but this is like full deep dive into like shadow. Like there is no, I want to say like literal lifestyle stuff. This is really like you're going in. It's all the inner game, all your inner aspects, your inner parts, your shadow, all of that. And it's so hard to put in the words what that program really offers you. But so the last 12 months, I've been involved with Illuminate. Um, and now we're here. so, so yeah, deep dive into the mental, emotional, and yeah, at this point, I know, or at least I think I know what I'm destined to do, and it's this space. Love to be a coach, but in terms of really understanding all aspects, and not, earlier it was not to knock like the literal things we can do to improve ourselves. Absolutely. There is a time and place for your food, your water, your fitness, your downtime. But if you don't know the driving force behind that, if you don't know why you're making the decisions you're making, or if you're not aware, you can forget about changing anything in your life if you're not aware of that. So what I'm saying is there's an understanding of here, like the mental emotional piece, and then understanding of everything external, and like bringing those together as a coach. And yeah, we're here. So
Wow. I feel like I could just listen to you keep talking. I want you to keep doing that, which you're going to, I know, but thank you for sharing all of that, Josh. That is, I'm sure, challenging maybe, or maybe you worked through that, but even to talk about the younger years of, gosh, being in front of a therapist, psychologist, whatever, at 4 or 5, and yeah, your mother's religion, that's a lot. And we can certainly touch on all of that as we get into this conversation more. But I've jotted down a few questions that came because
cool.
Your philosophy is about, I think, life, our lifestyles are hand in hand with Dan and I's, especially from my point. I used to coach for Momentum, doing nutrition coaching, and very quickly found out that I was projecting a lot of my wounds onto my clients because I wasn't healed. But yet, as you so beautifully described, taking the Chris Kessler program, wait, this is what you're supposed to do. I am supposed to rise as the sun does, drink my lime water and sea salt, count my macros, get the 10,000 steps. I'm working out, breaking my body to look good. But I'm still working on this, but miserable inside. And it's defeating because I feel for myself personally, this part of me is just constantly on a healing journey that's exhausting. And it's like, I gotta take a break here. This part of me is screaming to slow down, but I don't even want to because I'm afraid of where that's going to lead. But a question popped in my head when you kind of were observing your peers and things like that, saying that, you had this thought, what's going on emotionally, deeper down, which is really interesting to me. Did you find that there was like a common value that either everybody had or perceived them to have about this wellness space? And what I mean by value is, like, did they value themselves in a way that they wanted to better themselves and then better people? But was that value almost distorted, where they didn't know how to make an emotional connection to it at a deeper level? And while you think about that, I'll just kind of give a little story here. About a month ago, actually, it was probably maybe 3 months ago, Dan and I began reading a book that prompted a question about what we value. And it was very interesting to me because I haven't, again, on this, very spiritual wellness, holistic journey that I've been on, there hasn't been a part of me that looked into values much. And this specific book talked about identifying your values, and each day for 365 days, 1 year, write down something you value, either about yourself or the world, whatever it may be. And I began doing that a couple months ago when we started. I found very quickly I was challenged. I thought to myself, all right, I value my body for sure, or at least I thought I did. A part of me thought I did.
Mhm.
But there's this other part of me that's seeking validation through the way that I look.
Mhm.
And I
Mm,
feel I was manipulating myself, working out, eating a
mm,
certain way to get this, what I thought was a value to me. But what I realized that this part of me is really desperately seeking is validation from other people. So that's kind of a roundabout way of, I'm wondering if you had found a similarity or how this kind of ties into your observation and peer work. And you can certainly
yeah.
touch
Mhm.
upon anything I said too.
No, I so appreciate you sharing that and making that connection of wow, I'm doing said thing only to project and onto the outside world and maybe hoping for validation from others, but yet that part of me so wants maybe myself to validate. I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I'll take a stab, maybe back to like this whole I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but in that experience with all those peers, I observed while there was, to be fair, there was awareness practices um, that were invited and suggested, like journaling and meditation in that program too, which is super cool. And those are tools. I would say depending on the person, it could be a screwdriver, it could be some duct tape. I'm obviously going for the scalpel and the chainsaw with the mental emotional stuff, but those are tools that can help one to kind of see, well, what's coming out of my subconscious or what's kind of lying dormant inside of me. I'm not a journaler, but by all means, if that works for you, I celebrate you. But so just to mention that piece, I that aside, I did notice a very big savior complex, or archetype, if you will, whatever you're familiar with, but including myself. And I shortly understood that about myself um, after getting some sessions. But yes, I would offer anyone in that space of coach, whatever coaching looks like for you, whether it's physical or a doctor or a nurse or anybody in like, it's an emergency, I'm here to save you, that they're really trying to save maybe the little boy or girl inside of them or their mommy and daddy. So that fascinated me, and I hope I'm answering your question. In there, I don't know if most of us were aware, or at least I was not aware, that like I really want to save everybody. I wasn't sure why. I knew I did. Um, so yeah, it's one of those things that are just kind of lying dormant behind the scenes. That's what I observed. Whether anyone was quite aware of that or not, I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
so I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I am, that part of me certainly wants to be a savior, a rescuer. And I am a journaler,
Mhm.
have been for years, and something that it does help me discover these bits and pieces and parts of me, the masks that I've put on. And it always, I will say everything that I uncover with that always comes back to me.
Mm,
What I
mhm,
want others to provide for me
mhm,
is just and when I say I mean like the capital S self, like
mhm,
that
mhm,
I need to provide for the littler parts of me, typically
mhm,
my inner children, inner teens, but even some into my 20s. I mean, I told Dan this a couple months ago. I feel I'm just hitting the surface of a little bit growing up over the
mhm,
past maybe year with what I've experienced in my life that I didn't expect. So I try to honor these parts that we have, that I have specifically. Um, but the values thing is interesting as I come up more and more of where did my values stem from? Where do our
mhm,
values stem from? And how have they really subconsciously and unconsciously ruled the way that I lived.
Mm.
Because your ego kind of, and I would love your opinion on this, I'm not sure. Does your ego kind of dictate that? Because I feel like mine was sneakily covering them up for so long that I was just in a pattern loop of, mental thoughts that, like I said, I was thinking that I was doing myself a favor, probably my ego keeping me safe in the narrative and the story that I had running in my head. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just kind of diving into these values, but does the ego kind of play that gatekeeper and letting you not unlock those values for certain ways?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab. I would say 100% our ego does a really good job of seeking safety at all costs, at all measures, even if it's not beneficial for your soul or for what you're destined to do. Yeah, it does a great job of keeping me safe, keeping me in the literal realm of so attached to what I believe is really happening or going on or whatever the story is. That's been my experience. I would agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's so much like what you said before. We're like working with clients, and they all say like they want to do better, but they just can't. They want to get in shape, but they can't. It's like almost they want to value taking care of themselves, but really underneath that, they value safety and comfort and familiarity, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm by no means have I arrived. There's so many parts of me that still seek what's familiar, what's comfortable, um, what's safe. And I'm learning to work with those parts with more grace and patience and willingness. But I have the awareness now. Oh, just as a quick example of like the food piece, like there, when I would visit my mother, I would grow up on like quesadillas. We're talking 2 tortillas and some cheese. Um, I will find myself during the week um, making myself a quesadilla. The difference now, I'm aware and I'm choosing, okay, cool, maybe not the most optimal for my body, what have you, but I'll sit with little Josh that was 6, 7, 8, and like, all right, dude, we're gonna make a quesadilla and we're gonna enjoy this together. Now there's a difference there. That's appropriate for me now, and I'm going to spend time with that part of me until maybe that part of me dies into me, where that 8-year-old feels safe and seen and heard, that maybe the quesadilla is not going to be an option next week. I don't know, but it's working with those parts and giving them the safety, security, and the validation that they so desperately are asking for all the time, or at least I'm speaking from my own personal experience. Yeah, that's what it's like for me working with these parts.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. I think that I have found that these inner children parts of me can get very angry when I try to not listen to them. And it took me a while to figure this out. So I'm leaning into it, but I think, so much of my childhood and what I've also observed from other people is this is just, I believe, conditioning through, our caregivers, society, schooling, education, if there's certain religious, where there's always something wrong with us. And I continuously love to remind myself, and when I say myself, I mean the parts of me that, want a piece of cake after dinner. But wait a minute, cake makes you fat and that's not good, and you have to look presentable. So why on earth would you put that in your mouth? Ew, gosh, it makes my heart skip a beat when I say that, because I still like know that feeling, and I constantly work, or I try to constantly work on regulating my nervous system to feel a sense of safety. Exactly what you said, like sitting and speaking with this part of me, whatever age it is, an inner child's like, we're gonna enjoy this piece of cake right now, and it's gonna be delicious, and you can have it, and you're safe. Like, you are safe to eat this. And so I appreciate that food reference because that
Mhm.
is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. But I'm curious, you used the word aware. And I
Mhm.
think that that is such a key part of, I guess, life's journey in general. Dan and I talk about this all the time when we're coaching people and Dan still does, how do you make people become aware
Mhm.
when they already think they are?
Mhm.
And I don't want to dive into that necessarily, but in a sense, I was never aware of these values that I perceived for myself in all different ways.
Mhm.
How do we, or how have you either worked or observed other people identify their own values? And when I say own, like to truly understand what
Mm.
they value as opposed to an inherited value through, like I said, means of caregivers, teachers, friends, the media, social media,
Mhm. Mm.
TV, books, magazines. We're kind of constantly bombarded with what's good, bad, right, and everything in between.
I love this. Yeah, I love this. Yeah, a couple things come up. So for me, uh, I didn't start peeling back or even ask myself, what does Josh truly value? Maybe that was like 7 years ago. Um, and I would offer that took some conscious awareness of like, yeah, what do you value, Josh? And I would say that takes the mature part of us to sit down and acknowledge or even ask the questions. And what's coming up for me right now is supposedly a man asked Osho, what does it take to become a mature person? And Osho said, you have to start becoming a very skilled killer. You have to start killing your parents. You have to start killing your teachers. You have to start killing your leaders, or they will go on and on chirping in your mind. I couldn't agree more. Until you intervene, I'm gonna guess that is family of origin that is running and operating even in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s and your 50s until you really ask the question and pull back like, yeah, what's appropriate for me? Um, yeah, that's that's what I would say on like where values come from. And how I would even kind of approach that. And if we're talking about family of origin, and if we're never really asking the questions, well, I would say, yeah, like from you in the womb of like from zero to till now,
Mhm.
that everything you've downloaded from mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, like, and let's say mom and dad didn't ever intervene. Well, they're probably playing out what grandma and grandpa did. So if you're ever curious, go if you're able. What did grandma and grandpa do? I guarantee you that's what you're doing to this day. So I'm really kind of more lately in my coaching, like considering that this is all coming from drawn a blank on just the lineage, the family lineage of like our ancestral patterns. It blows me away unless someone goes in there and interrupts it, or um, but is aware of I'm going to choose something differently now. So
Mhm.
as I say that too, I want to say it takes a ton of courage to even step into that space to say um, you're basically questioning what you came from, and that's for my eyes and ears, that's tribal. You do something different from your tribe, um, you're separate now from the tribe. That equates death.
Mhm.
If you're not going to be with the tribe, you're going to die. I would say it might be an ego death that happens to us today, and you get to intervene and parent yourself now. And so, what am I saying? It's a slow process. This isn't like fast. This isn't furious. This isn't hit training. This is not for the faint of heart. And I get reminded of that when I get a little too comfortable, or let's say as a client, and let's go in here, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm still on autopilot probably 95% of the time, even though I've done this work and chipped away from it. But to come back to values, yes, family of origin is, I would say, is running and navigating your ship 90+% of the time.
I just want to almost like
Yeah, please.
clarify a little bit for the listeners. You mentioned earlier, is like the ego does a great job of keeping us safe. But from the ego's perspective, that's what it's keeping us safe from, is from being ostracized by the tribe and going our own way, right? I want to make sure that's kind of what you mean, and to clarify that.
Yeah, in that sense of, yeah, it to
Mm,
protect you. And from my perspective, maybe we'll dive into, I think this will kind of flourish more when we, maybe if we get a chance to talk about stories,
Mm.
because we all have a story, whether that's, and the ego likes to be very attached, at least in my experience of, that's absolutely true. Okay, then it will be. But I wonder,
mhm.
like we were speaking to earlier, but I notice a pattern arising, and I continue to keep doing said pattern, but yet it's now kind of disrupting my life, and I'm confused and I don't know what's going on. Well, then there's an opportunity to kind of come in there and maybe question your stories. But even questioning your stories is questioning your narrative, and maybe that narrative was coming from mom and dad. And who are you to even question what mom and dad told you, or what the pastor told you, or what your teacher told you? That's what I mean by it gets, probably doesn't want you to do that because it thinks you're in danger if you do so.
Mm, yeah. Let's
Is
kind of
that
let's make that
helpful?
transition. Let's lean into stories a little bit, because I think it's such a fascinating conversation, and it's very similar to values in the way that we've been
Hmm.
talking about them. I think is it's all playing out subconsciously, and at least from my perspective, I think it tends to, like, our values inform our beliefs, and then our beliefs inform our stories. But I don't know if that's 100%. That's just sort of like what's kind of coming to me. But I feel
Hmm.
like we always have, like, we have the present moment, and we have our experience of what's happening, and then we have our story about what's happening. And those two can be very different, and it can, like, our story is always only going to be like one aspect of it, or one perception of it. It doesn't necessarily, just because we think something or tell ourselves a story about something, it doesn't make it true. But I'm curious to kind of get your
Yeah.
thoughts on stories and how
Two.
they run our lives.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Two things are kind of bubbling up. I wonder where I want to start. Yeah, I'll start here. I'm gonna approach this with the idea and lens, maybe bigger lens of what if, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, that we're a projector. So behind my eyes, literally into my soul, into all my parts, that I'm projecting out onto the outside world. I'm looking at you two. I'm projecting. You guys are my movie screen. Um, but I'm projecting my experiences from the womb. If you want to get really weird, where were you pre-womb? So womb, 1 years old, let's start with the baby. Babies downloading all the information from colors and energy and emotion, and what's okay, what's not okay, what is am I being safe and secure with mother, like absorbing everything like a sponge. And so you have all those experiences from, again, from baby until this moment right here right now, and that I'm projecting out onto the outside world. um, that's where I like to start, at least to get everybody familiar with how I might start unpacking our stories. So there's that piece. And then also, many moons ago, I thought I was going to be a cop.
Hmm.
And I took a police report writing in college. So, how to structure a police report. And doing this work, and then having this knowledge of somebody that's just a cop. Um, I'll never forget, they said no matter the crime scene, so whether there was any eyewitnesses there, whether that was on the street, on a car accident, or all the neighbors saw your house get burglarized, you have to always consider and take into account all of those witnesses will have a different story for your report. Keep that right there. And then what I just mentioned about we're all projecting our own experiences of the world, and how you were groomed and what you absorbed and shaped is going to be projected out. And so I totally consider and play with both of those things. And it's not to discount Dan, it's not to discount Elise, it's to say you're a sliver of the whole, you're a sliver, I'm a sliver of the whole. It's not that I'm the truth, but maybe I'm a part of the truth. So it's, well, if that's true, then we're all looking through distorted lenses. Can we come together to understand each other, rather than I'm going to point the finger at Dan and say, Dan, you're full of it. I'm like, well, maybe I'm not here to discount Dan's experience. I'll never know Dan. Like, that's Dan's experience. Why would I discount him? And same goes for you, Elise. And then it's mine. And so now working with maybe that another part we haven't mentioned yet, but like, if we're going to step into this place of let's listen to understand each other, yeah, we might be all looking through a different pair of glasses.
Mm-hmm.
I want to preface with that.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
yes.
that's really important.
Beautiful. I love that police analogy. We kind of use that too sometimes with, there's going to be 10 witnesses. Each one of them will have a different story. But I love that. I love the glasses that we're all looking through our own lens. I might borrow that if you don't mind, Josh, because I really like that.
Please do. And I'm really big into art, all forms, music, film, symbolism has always been a common thing for me. And it's maybe a silly movie, but it's a throwback, maybe 90s, early 2000s, not sure, but called They Live. It's like a horror movie. Mm-hmm. They do an amazing.
I've never seen it, but I've seen like clips of it.
I invite you guys to go put that movie on, or at least the part where it's these two gentlemen, and one guy doesn't have the glasses, or I could have this backwards, but the point is he's struggling. Like, you need to see through these pair of glasses. They're both fighting to the bone. And all he's saying is like, hey, Dan, like, please look through these pair of glasses. You might see something different. For me, that symbolizes the resistance so much, where it's like, Elise is onto this, like, yo, we're doing something over here. You need to come be a part of it. And I'm like, no, like, you know what you're talking about. This whole like judgmental, critical part of us, shut off, closed-minded. No, I don't want to see. But the idea is like, you put on their set of glasses, you're like, wow, he's looking through a whole different lens, and he's seeing a whole different world than I'm seeing. Anyways, there's in movies, they do sometimes a good job of showing these type of things. And so, yeah, check that out if you're interested in the glasses.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely will. Along those same lines, I want to see, you had mentioned on one of your Instagram stories, you had like a quote, you're like kind of asking a question or presenting ideas in your highlights, and it said, "You'll never know anybody. You only have your experience of them."
And
there was one other where you asked the question, like, would you be willing to let go of your stories about others so that they can be born? I think both of those are so powerful, and it's really important in terms to like relationship, but it also, I feel like, carries over it almost like every other aspect of our life.
Those are deep questions.
Yeah. You know, it's cool. It's coming up for me right now with the latter part. With the couples, I'll start here and maybe like kind of pull it back. Now that meme of like, you know, couples that do blank together stay together. So couples that hike together, couples that eat the same food together, couples that watch movies together, and couples that do art together, and couples that go to bars together. That's your experience, maybe shared experience. What happens when your partner wants to go vegan? What happens when your partner doesn't want to go to the bar anymore, or maybe now does want to go to the bar? What happens when your partner, is spending a lot more social time? I would say that's scary. if you two are not on board. And that could be, yeah, scary. Like, who is this person? That's not who I know them to be, or who I think who they are. Um, and so I'm using the partner to start off with, but imagine how much resistance there might be if you haven't accepted the parts of yourself yet that are rigid, that aren't flexible. Um, so what am I saying? It comes back to, like, how willing are you to accept those parts of yourself before you can accept another person? And so when it comes to this story of letting someone die, yeah, maybe letting that that story that you created them to be, are you willing to even question that story? For one, are you willing to maybe consider that that might not be who they really are, and it's maybe who you've made them out to be? To get more dramatic, have you turned your partner into your metaphorical mother or father? Yikes. Are you having your partner, are you looking for validation and approval from your partner? And what I mean by that is that turned up to, like, I look to the outside world, whether that's my partner or that's my coworker or if that's my friend, am I looking to them like 80 or 90 or 100% of the time for validation and approval? You got yourself a problem. I would offer, we got a high level of codependency here.
Mhm.
Yes, I look to my wife for validation and approval, but maybe that's tuned down to like 10, 15, 20%. And so when I'm coming back to, like, can you let those stories maybe start to dissolve, or even willing to consider that? And it's like, wow, like, I'm now seeing them through a new lens. And it's almost taking my power back, giving them their power back. They don't even realize that you're turning them into something that they might not be. And so now it's like this weird, like, dissolving. And that's what I say by, like, reborn. And I could throw some examples out there more if it's helpful, but that's what comes up for me.
Yeah, I feel like that was really helpful. And I think I shared this when we spoke a few weeks ago or a month ago, whenever it was, just because the listeners will know Dan and I our relationship.
Mhm.
We've been together, I think we're on 19 years. Which it certainly doesn't seem that long. I feel like, because there's been so much individual deaths and rebirths of us as separate parts, but then as a couple in a relationship. But this past, like, 18 months to 2 year span, we have undergone much more than either of us expected, that I think, catapulted us on a path that we were asking for in this, journey through life, exploration, however you want to call it, soul school, as we like to
Mhm.
say. And things are beginning to change a lot in business senses, and kind of where we're now separating almost in business ways. And I
Mhm.
said to Dan one day, I was journaling, and I said to him, I think there's a part of me that doesn't want to see you change in this way.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm not sure his exact reaction to it. He can certainly share it, but he just was like, all right. And I feel like for the both of us, that was a really big aha moment, because it was, I like to use the term a lot that I kind of coined for myself in this process of self-development and self-discovery, is that it's a beautiful destruction. I'm so grateful for
Mhm.
each and every part of me that's gotten me to this point, but I there are those parts that I can't bring with me, and I honor destroying them, but in
Mhm.
a beautiful way, because they've gotten me to this point, and this is going to be a continuous beautiful destruction. But I think this is a beautiful destruction of our relationship as a pair. Because this part of me, I think, and this is just me, this is just my projection. It really honestly has nothing to do with Dan, in my opinion. I'd love to, hear from a coach if you have a different idea. But this part of me is trying to keep me safe. in what I see Dan doing. It has nothing to do with him, really. I want him to
Mhm.
succeed and be happy, but this one part is almost hesitant. Can I see him change? Do I want to see him change? And if I don't, why is this part benefiting from not seeing him
Mm,
change?
mm.
And I'd love to ask if there's another question I could explore if you've
Mhm.
got one for me.
Yeah, the first thing that comes up, maybe I'll ask the question and then go back to practical or not practical, a place I like to start with folks, like say if we were in a session, but what comes up for me right now, like, what does it represent to you? Um, if Dan is doing his own thing or it's doing something different, or like, what does that symbolize to you? So we're coming out of that literal story. Dan's doing something different, or Dan and I are choosing different interests, whatever that story is. Well, what does that represent or symbolize for Elise? That's what I would
Mm.
offer. Yeah.
So like what I feel is happening is
Oh, I love this.
it's like it's
Kind of
a
hot. Go
yeah,
ahead.
right.
Mhm.
It's like it's abandonment, the fear of
Mm,
abandonment. And that has been a fear of mine and something that I've worked a lot on, or I continue to work on as an inner child. Like that is a theme from a lot of inner child work that I've had come up. There's many parts of me that have felt abandoned. And then my intuition, Josh, kind of like just a short stint away before we wrap up this. My intuition, the way that it's been developing and the way that I've been cultivating it over, I'd say maybe the last 2 or 3 years, is I'll get what I call like downloads, like just almost one-liners, what I need for myself. Sometimes it's for, maybe the collective if it's about love or something, but they're just for me, they're the downloads that I receive.
mhm,
And I was writing one day and I was thinking about the abandonment, and an intuitive download came and said, you feel abandoned because you abandoned yourself.
mm,
So I was like, yeah. But obviously, that part of me is still there. So I think that that's what it is. It's I guess this part is scared that it doesn't know its place,
mm,
because we've worked together for so many years and done so much of
Mhm.
this journey together. It's kind of like growing up, as I was saying, so it's like we're almost growing up in a sense. And it's funny because I- we've been together so long. There's been so many iterations of us, but it's like I've almost been in this comfortable place for the past, 5 years or so, that there's that part of me that I think it's almost like a heaviness, the
mm.
fear of abandonment.
Yeah. Would it be okay if I offer something outside of what the question was?
Please.
Because you kind of inspired me with, you said, I feel abandoned.
Mm,
And I would say abandonment isn't quite a feeling.
mm,
So we can shift, and I'll make it about me if it's more appropriate. This is something I do with myself. This is something I offer with my clients. And it's a beautiful way, at least from my perspective, to get into ourselves more, our bodies more. And like I mentioned maybe before earlier, the ego has a, or at least for my eyes and ears, does a really good job of being infatuated with the past and salivates for the future. So how do we get into the now if it's true that it's all happening now? Well, um, and before I even mention that, um, I'm going to speak about emotions, and I'm an advocate for emotions, or how do you emote? And so I will offer that, in my humble opinion, I don't think God, consciousness, source, the great mystery, what have you, gave us the full spectrum of emotions, men and women, um, only to hide and deflect and push them away and numb out from them. I believe wholeheartedly we're supposed to, um, feel our emotions. And as I sit here before as a male speaking about emotions, if you need permission, I'm going to give every male that's listening permission to feel your emotions. And I'll speak about the ones that maybe aren't socially accepted. Your fear. It's okay to emote your fear. It's okay to emote your anger. It is okay to emote your sadness. And if it means expressing it by the way of tears, I invite you to express yourself in tears. I think culturally, women get the past that it's okay to cry, but yet men also have sadness, anxiety, and fear and pain, but yet they're shamed for emoting and crying. And I wonder if parents modeled and gave children a safe place to express their emotions, I wonder if I would even be sitting here with you guys today saying, oh, you have permission to cry. So, yeah, advocate for crying. I probably cry 1 to 3 times a week. If I don't cry, I kid you not, I get concerned about how much am I numbing out.
Mm,
So to
mm.
numbing out whatever that emotion is, and of course I like to be in these low arousal negative emotions, but you're happy. How often, well, for happiness or joy, like how often? Because I see this too. How long are you gonna stay in that happiness until you start celebrating with criticism?
Mm.
And then I get real curious, whose voice is that in your head? Is that your mom or dad? Oh, you could have done better and blah, blah, blah. Like, let's say you had a huge win, and all of a sudden you start hearing a voice of how you could have improved. I'm sorry, we just discounted how maybe elated and excited you are and grateful for yourself, and yet you're criticizing now. And then we'll shift over to, let's say I notice, at least in practice or within myself, and everybody's going to be kind of different in the sense of like, whatever that looks like, whether it's anger or fear or shame,
Mm.
I invite I invite myself as a practice daily. Can you notice the feelings and sensations? Can you notice that fear in your body for at least 30 seconds? If we're getting real crazy, I'll invite you to do it for 2 minutes. And
Mm.
if you notice that it's just shifting, 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 it's a practice. I wonder how much you're shifting or just numbing out. And so I'll invite to sit in that emotion and then notice the sensations are coming up. Like, do you notice a tickle? Do you notice a tingle? Do you notice pressure from head to toe, wherever in your body? Do you notice pain, or you just numb the F out? Whatever it is, we're not attaching a story to it. Can we just sit in it and saturate in it? Once we're there, and you really feel your feels, feel into those feelings, I would say, okay, cool. Where is it in your body? Like, I'm super tight in my chest, or my throat is super tight. Yeah, I'll pose the question to kind of get into that symbolic realm. Like, so we were in story, now we're in our feelings and sensations. More times than not, that feeling and sensation is representative of something that maybe happened to you that was shame-based or out of fear as a child. If you're even willing to consider that, that's cool. If not, what happened to you last week at work? Oh, well, I wasn't heard, or the boss didn't ask for my opinion, or I did swallow my truth and I didn't actually speak up what I think would be appropriate for the whole staff. And so while your throat is tight, and I wonder if it's that you're not speaking your truth, if you're not speaking or living by your values. Are you putting up boundaries, or are you just letting everybody step all over you? This gets into a really neat place for me, at least, and to connect into whether that's speaking our truth from our throats, or do I feel abandonment in my gut from family values? Was I not seen or heard from mom? And we get to kind of explore this in our physical bodies. And so that's something I like to start with when we're trying to understand ourselves better and maybe crack into our stories.
Mm, yes.
At this point, I have no idea if I answered that initial question, but it's where I like to start.
No, I feel like that was beautiful. It's almost answering questions with more questions, which is what I try to do. I really actually, of course, there are answers that I seek for certain parts, but I want the questions to arise with other questions so that I can dig deeper. So I am grateful that you posed this. And I feel you just did a wonderful job explaining how to really sit with the stories that we have to feel them in our body, which really I think is, in my opinion, brushed over a lot. I'm learning the power of feeling the feelings somatically.
Mm,
I didn't realize this until last year. And, this energy that it was being stored needed to be released. And when you were talking about the pressure in your throat, I feel that probably once a day. And it
mm,
typically comes with sadness.
mm,
Like I'll sit and need to, I'll just, sometimes I'll have a story in my mind that I bring up and try to figure out where in my body it somatically comes. Other times I'll just sit and see what comes up. And it's, I would say 95% of the time, just immediate tears that come up with a very tight swelling and pressure around my throat. And I don't want to get too much into this because we're wrapping up here, but there has
mm,
been a lot of fear and resistance around always speaking my truth, which
mm,
is certainly something that I inherited, I believe, at a very young age, to be seen and not heard.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate you giving voice to that. Yeah, it's interesting bringing it back to the family values. Like I have a 2.5-year-old girl, and I
Mm,
get to be around a lot of parents, and
mm,
uh, or yeah, whether that's on the playground or with other family members, and shaming is just so second nature. Or we're gonna break your will, and you don't have a voice. And so I'm interrupting that, where I could see that, like, I allow her to cry. The most subtle way, people might think I'm batshit crazy, and that's cool. Most parents, let's say the child falls down, bumps, scrapes the knee. Oh, stop that crying. That didn't hurt that bad. Suck it up already. I hear that a lot. And what I'm really hearing is um swallow your tears. You don't need to be crying. Bottle it up and so that's softer. Imagine something a little more traumatic. It gets stuck. Gets
Mhm.
stuck in your gut, your heart, your chest, your throat, your head, what have you. And it might be stuck until you start to feel it and let it loose and let it loosen. And so now we're talking 30 plus years, maybe 40 years, 50 years. If you're lucky, if you even start to consider that, oh yeah, this pain reminds me of when my mom said, get over it. There's nothing to be sad about. Well, mom's projecting what she thinks. It's not maybe true for your own experience. It hurt like hell, and you want to cry, but they're telling you to shut the f up. Like, it starts there.
yeah.
So what's beautiful is, as adults, you can come in and reparent yourself that is scared, that does want to be seen. I would say totally wants to be seen, maybe needs to be seen, needs to be heard, but not the way you were parented. You get to redo that. What you didn't receive, you get to give that to self. Like,
Mm,
I see that looks like it hurts, and I'm going to be right here next to you. Take as long as you need to cry. There's a difference between suck it up already and keep going. Um, so it's curious, and back to are you willing to be curious? Are you willing to ask questions? Are you willing to have wonderment? And I think the ego is a little less threatened if you're just, yeah, I don't know, maybe, or I wonder, or
Mhm.
um, even if, let's say, we're not, you and I are talking about inner child work. Okay, cool. That might be really out there for someone. What do you mean 2 years old is still in me? No, no, no.
Mhm.
Okay, okay, cool.
Mhm.
And so kind of coming back and meeting the client where they're at, and you ask something like, well, why do you think your stomach is in knots? I don't know. Okay, well, what if I said you get to guess? I don't, the ego is like, guess. Oh, this guy doesn't know. Okay, let him guess. And it kind of opens up the possibilities of like, well, maybe. And you're not so attached to a rigid story. And so the more you're like holding on so tightly to like back to this whole story thing, if you can start to let go with a little less fear and shame by just guessing, who knows, you might learn something about self.
That's awesome. That's so powerful.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a beautiful way to wrap up because it really does go hand in hand with your invitation for the listeners to return to that childlike innocence. And I mean, how beautiful is that if we could explore each one of these instances, stories, interactions with the playfulness that a child has. I mean, they don't judge, they're just
Mhm.
accepting and loving and like a sponge of absorbing information in the most loving way. I think, I don't have children,
Mhm.
but that's how I remember my childhood, as innocently as I can. So it has been a journey. I feel like there is so many other deep conversations and topics we could kind of branch off into, but I think we covered so much. And thank you for helping uncover a little bit more of the parts and pieces of me that I'm going to dive deeper into, because I also think that that was wonderful the way that you posed the questions for myself and to Dan that will also be helpful
Mhm.
for listeners. But as we're wrapping up, did we miss anything? Do you want to is there anything that you feel you were meaning to say but didn't, or
Yeah, I'll just close with yeah, one thing that's kind of bubbling up for me right now. Like we kind of touched on so many different
Mhm.
like layers and aspects and like it went really wide. And I just want to offer, with all of the parts, the inner aspects, whether that's your inner child or the inner critic of maybe that's your mom and dad, um, all of the archetypes, all of the personas. What if I said behind all of that, at your core, at the very depth of self, that you are whole, you are complete, and there's nothing wrong with you. You're nothing to be fixed. You're not meant to necessarily be changed. Can you accept yourself for who you are, not for who you need to be, and really saturate in that? That's my invitation for everyone. That would you be willing to sit in? Yeah, maybe I am whole and complete, and there's nothing wrong with me. So that's my offering for everyone. And if you're still with us, I appreciate you for listening, and thank you guys. I really appreciate you giving me a platform to kind of share my heart, my mind, and appreciate you guys having a space to offer these types of conversations that can be kind of nuanced. And yeah, I appreciate it.
that was beautiful, Josh. Thank
Mhm.
you. We are just thrilled to have you on. And again, we know we thank the universe every day for us introducing, or the universe introducing us to Jator, as you might probably do too, right? That blessing in disguise that day you didn't see Paul Check and saw Jator
Yeah.
there. He's been a magical for all of us. But if people would like to learn more about your coaching or understand, how they could get in touch with you, what's the best place that we could direct them?
Yeah, thank you. Instagram, you can hit me up there
Great.
at journey underscore with Josh. If you're looking for community, connection, questions, you want to coach, maybe coaching is something that's on the radar or you're curious. I'm currently offering free consultations to see for a better fit. So that's where you can reach me.
Awesome. That sounds wonderful. Again, thank you for joining us. It was
Thank you
certainly
so
deep,
much.
Joseph. Yes, thank you.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.